Welcome to EWTN Live. I'm Father Mitch Pacwa, and this is a program where we bring you guests from around the world. Tonight, we will talk with two writers, one of whom is also a filmmaker. And we'll talk about a very interesting relationship between a Catholic Pope and a Protestant U.S. president who together confronted one of the great evils of the 20th century. Before we get to that, we do want to talk briefly with EWTN's Director of Acquisitions and Co-Productions, Mr. John Elson, about some new programming coming up. John?
Good to see you, Father.
What do you have for us this time?
Thank you. Well, I want to let you know, Father, and our audience watching at home, that this upcoming Saturday, October 24th, we're going to be premiering all 12 episodes of our original docudrama series entitled The Reformation. Mm-hmm. Now, in the Gospel of John, we see our Lord Jesus praying that all may be consecrated in the truth. Mm-hmm. And there are many truths of the Reformation that many people don't know about. Mm-hmm. That Martin Luther was an Augustinian Catholic priest that mm-hmm. suffered from tremendous scrupulosity. That the primary supporters of the Reformation were wealthy German nobles who sought to weaken the church for their own personal gain. And the fact that following Luther and his first followers, John Calvin, Ulrich Zwingli in Switzerland, that there was a tremendous disagreement among all three of them, yes. Each writing against the other. And that division, unfortunately, has carried through the body of Christ for the last 500 years. Mm-hmm. In the series as well, we'll present Henry VIII, who was declared a defender of the faith by Pope Leo X in 1521, mm-hmm. and then 13 years later, founds the Church of England because of the unwillingness of Pope Clement VII to grant him a divorce from Catherine of Aragon. Yes. So in the series, we'll present the Counter-Reformation led by the Jesuit order, and we'll speak to the Council of Trent as well and the reforms that were done there. Now, in the clip that I want to show, we are showing a scene from what's called the debate between Johann Eck, a very talented German theologian, who debated against Martin Luther in Leipzig. It's called the Leipzig Disputation. Yes. And it was a very key moment in Reformation history, and we have a little clip from that that we'd like to show everyone now.
Let's take a look at it.
During the first day of their debate at Leipzig, Eck had skillfully drawn Luther out. Luther had to defend other heretics in order to save his position and not be totally defeated.
This idea emerges in Martin Luther's theology for the first time in a polemical context. In 1519, in the Leipzig debate with John Eck, the Catholic theologian pushed Luther to the wall and forced Luther to admit that the theology he was teaching had already been condemned by the Church in its condemnation of the Bohemian reformer John Huss. And when pushed to the wall in that way, Luther realized, well, yes, but I reject the authority of the Church and the authority of sacred tradition, and I'll base myself on the Scriptures alone. So you see, it wasn't after deep systematic reflection on the nature of revelation, but out of polemical necessity that Luther simply rejects the authority of the Church and the authority of sacred tradition. Another way of thinking about it would be this: why do modern Protestants believe in the doctrine of Sola Scriptura, or Scripture alone? Is it because the Bible itself teaches them this doctrine? Far from it. I think it's inherited from their tradition. That's the irony. They believe in Scripture alone because of the authority, or so-called authority, of their own tradition.
All right. So this is a new series that we're going to have all 12 episodes on the Reformation. It'll be on Saturday, October 24th, fairly close to one of the anniversaries, because it was at the end of October in 1517 that this division began. So it'll be good to have.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, John, for being with us. We'll come back in just a couple of minutes with tonight's guests, so please stay with us. Well, welcome back. Our guests tonight have put their writing and film directing talents together to show what it took to end the Cold War between the Western democracies and communism. In doing so, they reveal a unique relationship between Pope John Paul II and President Ronald Reagan. It was forged from very similar experiences almost 40 years ago. And there was a shared belief that God was using both of them to defeat communism. President Reagan called it the divine plan. Take a quick look at a little clip we have.
You and I have a rendezvous with destiny. We'll preserve for our children this, the last best hope of man on earth, or we'll sentence them to take the last step into 1,000 years of darkness.
Pope John Paul II is a dagger aimed right at the throat of the Soviet Union.
A desperate time.
Other American presidents tried to figure out how to manage the Cold War. Reagan wanted to win the Cold War.
A world divided by superpowers.
When a government abuses the rights of its own people, it is a grim indication of its willingness to commit violence against others.
The real big battle of the 20th century was between the forces of good versus the forces of evil.
Two boys raised during violent times who would become a president and a pope.
Do not be afraid. Do not be afraid.
What you just saw are a few scenes from a documentary that you'll be able to see here at EWTN. It is called The Divine Plan. Ronald Reagan, John Paul II, and the dramatic end of the Cold War. This will be on later tonight at 10 p.m. Eastern Time here on EWTN. But joining us now in the studio is the writer and director of the documentary and the co-author of the book by the same name, Mr. Robert Orlando. And joining us via Skype from Grove City, Pennsylvania, is the Divine Plan co-author, Mr. Paul Kengor. Robert, welcome. Good to have you here in studio. And Paul, it's nice to have you also by Skype. Thank you for being with us.
Good to be with you again, Father Mitch. Thank you.
Great.
Great to be here.
I was able to watch this documentary that you did. It's really wonderful, wonderful. And, you know, of course, I was well into my 30s as this drama was developing. In fact, I was living in Germany when Pope John Paul II went to Poland as Pope for the first time. I certainly remember when he was elected. I was excited that he was Polish, but had no idea what this would all lead to. And the great thing about your documentary and your book, both, is that it reminds those of us who lived through it what it was like in those days, dangerous days. And it also teaches people who weren't around yet, too young, to understand what tremendous things were at stake. Communism was extremely evil. Far, as bad as the Nazis and Hitler were, the communists were far more dangerous than the Nazis. So thank you for doing this documentary.
You know, I was just going to say that what comes to mind, the divinity aside, was the idea of when Christ rides into Jerusalem, makes the symbolic statement how he's being watched by the Roman Empire and the Sadducees and the political powers that be. And when I imagined him going to Poland for the first time, I thought of it in light of that he had a cloud of witnesses watching him politically, thinking, oh no, he's not going there, is he? And he was very defiant and very bold about it. So
very much so. Yeah. And you know, one of the points that you bring out in the documentary is that the key was John Paul's and Ronald Reagan's vision of the human person. It's not just about the political power, and it's not only the freedom of capitalism versus the oppression of a state-controlled economy in socialism or Marxism. It was also a very different view of human beings as having freedom versus human beings as slaves of the communist state. Talk a little bit about that between you two as to how that formed your way of doing this film.
I'll just start, Paul, and you could pick up. No, that's so key, because communism usually takes advantage of people who are impoverished, desperate, the depressions and all the lower end of the human arc, let's say, toward progress. But where it loses it is that it doesn't maintain that very sacred wall between the individual, the human being, one's ability to have faith and believe in God and be liberated by their belief and continue to work in an imperfect world, whereas the state comes in and you wind up becoming just a cog in the wheel. And I think maintaining that fine line was what Ronald Reagan and John Paul II both understood, I think, by being World War II and Cold War kids. They understood where it came from.
Yeah.
You know, Father Mitch, Ronald Reagan and John Paul II both talked about the sanctity and dignity of the individual. And they both believed that human beings are made in the imago Dei, in the image of God. But John Paul II did Evangelium Vitae, the gospel of life, talked about a culture of life. One of my favorite quotes from John Paul II, he said this Christmas 1978. He said, every human being is special, precious, and unrepeatable. Right. And they were all made, they were God, they were made in the image of God. Whereas the communist view of man was a strictly materialistic view. It was an atheistic view. Marx said religion is the opiate of the masses. It is the sigh of the oppressed creature, the heart of a heartless world, the soul of soulless conditions. He said it's the opiate of the masses. He said communism begins where atheism begins. They were very strict Darwinian evolutionists. Vladimir Lenin said all worship of a divinity is a necrophilian. There's nothing more abominable than religion. So to Ronald Reagan and John Paul II, that was completely antithetical to how they viewed the human person.
That, I think, is very key because another side of that is the strong teaching based on his philosophy as well as theology that John Paul had for the dignity of the human being being inherent. We Americans certainly have that in our Declaration of Independence, but even those lines about the unalienable rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness as given by the Creator, by God, that actually goes back to St. Robert Bellarmine, and that Jefferson was citing arguments by Robert Bellarmine against divine right of kings. But now in the 20th century, well then in the 20th century, in the 21st, it was applied against these totalitarian governments, whether it be National Socialism, the Nazis, or communism in Soviet Union.
Yeah, so the collective, the idea of the collective is where, again, you lose your individual identity and what maintains that distance. But let me just go to another point here. I think that's why the idea of them being actors was so, for me, insightful to tell the story, and for Paul also, was because the idea of using an analogy of an actor, right? An actor gets a script, like a Declaration of Independence, or but they get to interpret the script with their free will, right? If you don't have the free will, or you don't see the actor as having a free will, what's the point of doing the play? The play's over, right? So using this and that metaphor in my mind, I always thought, well, meaning can only come if you could take steps in the divine plan to figure out your destiny, work out your salvation with fear and trembling, right? You get to act upon it, and then for the most part, you learn the divine plan in retrospect because you can't predict it in advance. So the idea of being an actor is also a metaphor for our having a free will and operating in the real world.
And you bring out very strongly in the documentary that both Ronald Reagan and John Paul had been actors. John Paul as part of an underground theater to stand up against the Nazis and to continue Polish literature and language in the face of the oppression, which they knew would eventually die out. And Ronald Reagan in Hollywood was an actor. And they both used that to be able to communicate to folks. This is a very important element in your documentary.
Father Mitch, that was really Rob's doing. So he first kind of came to this story. He had read my book, A Pope and a President, which came out in May 2017. And that was about a 700-page long historical narrative account of the two men. And he looked at this because Rob comes from a background in acting, an acting school. He looked at this and he said, you know, these two men that you're talking about throughout your book, never forget that they were actors. And you know, acting was really a first love for both of them. And so here they are. Ronald Reagan did acting on the big screen. Karol Wojtyła did it on the stage. And here they were in the 1980s. You know, all the world's a stage. And we are merely players. And here were two men on the grandest of all stages, this international platform, playing out through their choices. I know you know the Polish translation of this, I'm sure. Karol Wojtyła, John Paul II, wrote a book called The Acting Person, which in the original Polish is actually person and act. And he made the point there that our moral choices matter. So he wasn't just an acting person in terms of somebody who was an actor, and this speaks to Ronald Reagan as well. But the choices that you make as an individual, as an actor in this world, for everybody, those actions matter. We're defined in part by our moral choices. Our moral choices have consequences. And so that spoke to not just what the Soviet Union and the Soviets were doing with their choices, but to how Ronald Reagan and John Paul II felt that they had to respond on the international stage in confronting the evil that was going on in what Ronald Reagan called the evil empire.
Just to be a little bit, that was great, Paul. Just to be a little more technical, if you think about it, we're on a set right now on a stage. If Ronald Reagan did, I think it was 80 films. He hit his marks. He knew where the camera was. He knew his lines. I'm not saying that to make it the surface observation. I'm saying to execute at that level when you're practiced like that, then you add to it a personal faith, a real conviction. Then you're close to death, and you come out of a healing period and you step back on the stage. I mean, it seems like even the divine plan was in their preparation prior to their acting out in the real world.
Well, the issue that you bring up in the documentary is because they were actors well established in their careers. They could choose their own script, and they chose scripts based on the truth of what it means to be a human being from Scripture and from good philosophy and from the Declaration of Independence.
And their personal experience.
And their personal experience. Yeah. But then they also knew how to communicate and move people. That was brilliant. We have a number of scenes in this where Ronald Reagan is so persuasive in his speech at the Brandenburg Gate in Germany, in Berlin. These kind of things just were able to move people, and we still remember that. As a matter of fact, let's take a look at that clip. Let's take a look at that.
There is one sign the Soviets can make that would be unmistakable, that would advance dramatically the cause of freedom and peace. General Secretary Gorbachev, if you seek peace, if you seek prosperity for the Soviet Union and Eastern Europe, if you seek liberalization, come here to this gate. Mr. Gorbachev, open this gate. Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall. Yes, across Europe this wall will fall, for it cannot withstand faith, it cannot withstand truth. The wall cannot withstand freedom.
You see this crowd of, I assume, mostly Germans in Berlin hearing this. They understand English. They understand exactly what he meant. Mm-hmm. And meanwhile, I'm a big fan of the Bugs Bunny characters and cartoons. And during the Solidarity time, I always thought of Pope John Paul as being Bugs Bunny walking into the powder magazine of Yosemite Sam with a lighted match.
And boom.
and he just keeps tossing them in. No matter how often the communists tried to stop his match, speaking of faith, freedom, and human dignity, they couldn't stop it. Mm-hmm. And they could keep trying to put it out, but he just tossed it in again, and the system collapsed.
I just want to put one. Go ahead, Paul.
Well, and you can see there the power of these men who knew their lines, right?
I was just going to say.
Because that line with Ronald Reagan, that line, Father Mitch, was taken out of that speech a number of times. And Rob and I have talked to Peter Robinson, who wrote the Brandenburg Gate speech. That line had to be reinserted one more time by Ronald Reagan on the airplane on the way over. So he knew, and Peter Robinson said when he met with Ronald Reagan in the speechwriting office, Reagan said, oh yeah, I like this line. This is the one line that I really want to deliver. And with John Paul II going to his first trip to Poland, June 1979, he speaks at Victory Square in Warsaw. Yes. So imagine that, right? He picks Victory Square of all things. And he said exactly what the Soviets and the Polish communist government didn't want him to say. He said, there can be no just Europe without the independence of Poland marked on its map. And that right there, you talk about Bugs Bunny going in, or Yosemite Sam, and going in and blowing everything up. I mean, that was, you could just see the communists saying, no, you're not supposed to say it. And of course, after all of that, what do we remember most? John Paul II telling the crowd of thousands, be not afraid. So some of the greatest moments with this Pope and this president, these former actors, were their lines, the lines that they recited and that they knew would have power that would resonate.
Yep. But they had power because they resonated.
That's what I was going to say.
Yeah,
if you don't mind, I was going to
resonated. Please.
If we just turn this into an acting class for a second, and we said we were going to read a scene from the Divine Plan, let's say, just to be fictional for a second. We were about to do the first thing we might do the blocking. Okay, you're going to go from here to there. You're going to go from. The second thing is, do you know your lines? You'd have your lines, but what an actor knows is how do you take a moment. This is the presence of an actor is what they practice. That's the deepest insight of these men, is that they read a crowd. It's not performing in, again, a surface way. It's knowing the moment to pause, knowing the moment to deliver. And if you listen to Ronald Reagan, the way he slows down on his speech and then stops, then ramps it up again and then repeats the word. He knows exactly like he's in a moment. And I think what John Paul II does by those symbolic acts is he undermines the opponents, not directly, but by continuing to act out the lighting of the fuse each time, he's showing defiance. Holy defiance.
Well, I want to show another clip from the divine plan. Let's take a quick look at that to continue on this point.
Ronald Reagan was shot on March 30th, 1981. And then Pope John Paul II was shot just 6 weeks later.
God did have a purpose for the Pope and for Reagan.
They were preserved through this suffering for a high purpose. I don't think you'll understand either one of them without understanding that.
So they finally come together on June 7th, 1982 at the Vatican.
To do some serious examination about what God had in store for them now.
Both Reagan and Pope John Paul II shared the belief of optimism.
We share peace, justice, and the expansion of freedom.
The Pope gave people an alternative worldview.
They were working in the realm of the human spirit.
The most important subjects like hope, love, family, friendship, and much more.
Poland could be the linchpin to take down the entire Soviet communist bloc.
Reagan said, my policy in the Cold War is very simple. We win, they lose.
The attempt to win the Cold War, to bring about the Soviet collapse, started, and it started in Poland.
Everyone hoped that communism would be over.
There were hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people, and suddenly everybody saw one another.
It represented the fear of the communist leadership throughout the world.
And the communists are deathly afraid.
I see one of the great stories of the end of the 20th century.
One of the points that you develop also in this documentary is that the leadership of the Soviet Union, the highest leadership, decided to assassinate John Paul after his visit in Poland. I think it was the following November. And they used Bulgarian agents to recruit Mehmet Ali Acha, a Turk. And as you point out, especially in the book, if it weren't for a nun tackling Ali Acha, she tackled him and brought him and kept him, he would have been killed himself. Because the communists don't do this.
He was a patsy,
Yeah, he's totally a patsy, totally ignorant of what was going on. And they saved his life and led to one of the most poignant moments of reconciliation when John Paul went and met with him.
Reagan went to John Paul at the Vatican,
No. I mean, when John Paul met Ali Acha.
Oh, yes.
In prison. And Ali Acha, you know what he was most afraid of? He said, "Who is this lady of Fatima?"
That's right.
That scared him because Fatima was the name of Muhammad's favorite daughter, and it's also the wife of Ali, after whom he was named.
Did not know that.
And so, who's this lady of Fatima? And of course, there's this, John Paul took the bullet that had been shot into him by Ali Acha to Fatima, and there it is. You can see a picture. It's placed in the crown on the statue of Our Lady. It's not a jewel, but it's Pope John Paul's perhaps most intimate gift, a bullet that almost killed him by just millimeters.
So
By the way, Father Mitch, the sister of Ali Acha, her name was
Fatima. Of course.
And when that's exactly right. When John Paul II visited him in prison, and Rob could talk about this as well, how what they talked about a little bit, but yes, Acha wanted to know about this goddess of Fatima. He called it goddess of Fatima, and he was afraid with this sort of Muslim sense of justice, right? Rather than John Paul II's mercy, that this goddess was going to rain down a lightning bolt and zap him right on the spot, right? So but he knew. I mean, he was shot on the feast day of Our Lady of Fatima, May 13th, 1981, which would prompt John Paul II when he got to Gemelli Clinic. This was July 18th, 1981. Cardinal Sepper for the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith. John Paul II said to Cardinal Zivich, his aide, it would have been Father Zivich at that point, he said, 2/13 of May, 2/13 of May. And he asked to see the third secret of Fatima for the first time. And he got it there in Gemelli Clinic. He read the original Portuguese text. He read the Italian translation. And he said, this is it. The third secret applies to me.
Yeah.
And I was just going to add to stay on that, the details, but also this developing theme of drama as a metaphor for their lives. In anyone who knows storytelling, there's a part of a story which we call the inciting incident or the crisis, which basically means that the antecedents in their lives, prior to that, their experiences, their faith, all the things, get all galvanized. And from that point forward, they can't be the same people. They must focus their goal, go after the enemy. It's like the launch period for any good story. So even when I was looking at the material, I'm like, wow, that was another gift. I need to have both of them within 6 weeks hit their marks in the storytelling.
Yes.
It was, I say it again, it was the Tom Clancy novel that was true.
Yeah, yeah. This is just such a marvelous, marvelous story. And I hope you get a chance to see this movie. We need to take a break. It's just so I carried away a bit. But, and of course, tomorrow is the feast of Pope St. John Paul. So we'd love to have you watch this movie called The Divine Plan, Ronald Reagan, John Paul II, and the dramatic end of the Cold War. It's tonight, Wednesday, October 21st at 10 p.m. Eastern Time, with an encore on Thursday, October 22nd at 4 p.m. Again, that's the feast day of John Paul, October 22nd. And you can, of course, get a DVD copy at EWTNRC.com. It's item number 1866D, 1866D. All right, we'll be back in a couple minutes with hopefully some of your questions and comments. All right, we are ready. And we actually have a caller online already. Thomas, where are you calling from?
Tennessee.
Oh, that Thomas. It's been so long since we've had live callers.
I know it. I'm glad to be back with you.
Yeah, back in the saddle again. So what can we do for you today?
Well, I've had a question for Dr. Paul Kengor and, of course, Mr. Orlando as well. But Dr. Kengor, you've already touched upon the message of Fatima and how it relates to the divine plan. But I think after reading your works, I think this is important. I believe this is important as well, and that is President Ronald Reagan's speech to the Portuguese Assembly in May of 1985 and how that showed his commitment to the divine plan.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you for bringing that up. That's an amazing speech. And I got to tell you, I spent years working on that book, and I had no idea about the speech. There was only one newspaper in the English-speaking world that even reported on it. That was the New York Times. And the Times just mentioned it in passing as part of Reagan's 10-day trip to Europe. I think it was May 9th, 1985. And I learned about the speech when I was interviewing Tony Dolan, who was Ronald Reagan's chief speechwriter. He wrote the Evil Empire speech. He wrote Reagan's Notre Dame commencement speech, which was given just 4 days after John Paul II was shot. I think he gave that speech May 17th, 1981. And Tony Dolan, I was talking to him, I said, so do you think Reagan knew about Fatima? And he said, oh, yeah, Reagan knew about Fatima. His father was Catholic, and his brother was a daily communicant. And Reagan, at the very least, would have known about it from the major Hollywood film on Fatima when he was president of the Screen Actors Guild. And then Tony said, and of course, Paul, you know about the speech in Portugal, too. And I said, whoa, speech in Portugal. And he said, yeah. And it occurred to me, Thomas and Father Mitch, that on all the word searches that I had ever done in all the presidential papers for Ronald Reagan, I never typed in the word Fatima. I didn't think I needed to. And I typed it in, and whoa, there it landed on that speech. I looked it up, and Ronald Reagan said before the entire Portuguese government, president, prime minister, legislature, he talked about how there residing in the prayers of the children of Fatima lies more power than in all the weapons and armies of all the presidents in all the world. And he mentioned the Fatima children. He mentioned John Paul II going there the year after that he was shot in May 1982. So it was, that's a remarkable moment. And it was completely missed in the West. No one even reported.
Yep. There were a number of little things that happened that, for instance, a friend of mine, as a matter of fact, I had been his spiritual director, was working at the Franciscan gift shop in the city of Assisi, Italy. It's part of the Basilica. And when he was there, a Russian diplomat came and he gave the tour because he spoke English. He was American, spoke English. The Russian spoke English, not Italian. So he gave the tour. And at the end, the Russian diplomat said, I want a rosary of Our Lady of Fatima for Mr. Gorbachev. He asked for it. And this I know not by a little rumor I heard. The young man, now he's a priest, told me the story himself, how Mr. Gorbachev wanted that and that he was interested in Our Lady of Fatima. So the Franciscan gave it to him. And I think also a statue of Our Lady of Fatima. This was part of a divine movement that brought down this evil empire. Now, it's something to keep in mind. You bring out in the documentary that Ronald Reagan also said, that I called it the evil empire during the time of Mr. Andropov, who was a nasty man. He was really...
Weigel calls him reptilian.
Yes. and killing, I mean, he just murdered his friends, if you call them friends. And he said, in the time of Mr. Gorbachev, you don't call it that. It's a different era.
I think it's important. I think it's very important what you're saying, because the position of the story and the film and the book, and Paul could speak more to this, is that Gorbachev was born from a family of faith. So he had faith in his past, number one. But number two, whatever you want to say the geopolitical forces were, he was cornered and didn't have a lot of options. So he thought he was giving a concession by allowing the churches and the religious freedom to come back a bit to meet the West where he was at. But I think it blew up on him. This is the position of the film. Because once you let faith out, then people want it all. They experience it. And so to your point, it must have been in the air and the water for the Russians at the time as they saw it tipping over and couldn't keep the lie behind the wall anymore.
And
go ahead, Paul.
His mother was named Maria, was a deaconess in the Russian Orthodox Church. His name Mikhail was actually a baptismal name for Michael the Archangel.
Of course.
And it was he was very interested in Scripture. He had grandparents who were Christians, and Ronald Reagan and John Paul II were both very focused on this, Father Mitch. They thought, wow, can it be that the leader of the Soviet Union is a closet Christian? And when Ronald Reagan came back from his first meeting with John Paul II in Geneva in November 1985, he immediately called Michael Deaver and he said, Mike, he believes. And Deaver said, what? Are you telling me that the head of the evil empire believes in God? He said, I don't know, Mike, but I think he might. I think he could be a closet Christian. By the way, as we're having this conversation, Mikhail Gorbachev is still alive. And he very well may have converted, at least become a Christian. But for whatever reason, he continues to keep this very close to the vest.
What I should add, this is a very specific point of data, is that when I spoke to Matt from TBN, who runs TBN, he was doing his show, but he did another piece on Gorbachev, interviewed him one-on-one, said he admitted that on camera.
Yeah.
So
that he's a believer.
Yes.
And the other thing, besides Gorbachev as a leader, and Putin seems to have some kind of faith. Putin is a problem person, to be sure, morally speaking, but he seems to have some kind of faith. And the Russian Orthodox Church is flourishing. The number of people who are coming back to the Russian Orthodox faith is flourishing. There are thriving monasteries and convents and churches, and they're rebuilding and building new ones and beautiful churches. I've watched the dedications of some of the churches by the patriarch. It is remarkable what that freedom of religion has meant for the people of the former Soviet Union, now the Russian Federation. We have another caller. Hello, Lucy? Lucy, are you there? I don't think we're having trouble getting Lucy on. Oh, yes, there you are. Lucy, where are you calling from?
From Connecticut.
Wonderful. And what is your question?
I have two full questions. One, how did Kengor and Orlando do their research to do this, the divine plan between St. John Paul II and President Ronald Reagan, and how did they do research? And then the second question is there any way they could do research, or are there any prophecies out there for current President Donald Trump and maybe the divine plan against the evil axis, of Iran, China, and Korea, and what's going on with our world today in our country? A lot of us are very scared, and we're praying for our president and for the United States.
Paul, can you take the first one? I'll take the second one. And if I could just circle back quickly to your point about, if you look at modern iconography right now, I've seen it already, but Putin is putting himself, his image, in with the old Russian Orthodox iconography in the same way Stalin did, and I've already seen the images. You could see how he needs to embrace religion to a certain degree. Even Stalin did at the time. Yeah. But that's it. But go ahead, Paul. If you want to do the first one, I'll do the second one on China and the modern.
Yeah, well, that's good, because I don't want to touch the second one. Okay. So you can take a crack at the second one. And I would add, too, that Putin is not a communist, right? I mean, Putin is a Russian nationalist. Yes. He's a Russian strongman. Yes. He even laments the breakup of the Soviet Union, I think, because it harkens back to a greater, larger Russia, right? But he's anti-communist, and he's pro-Russian Orthodox Church. He is a Christian, a very flawed one, but a Christian nonetheless. But as to the second point, Rob, I'll let you address the second.
So the best way to address it is to give you a bit of an anecdotal story. So when I traveled the country doing all the events for the Divine Plan, spoke to the audiences, that question came up a lot at the end. The film would end, it would come to resolve, and it was very quiet at times before the hands went up or anything. And you could see when people took all this in and said, wow, that was history, either I forgot or you reminded me, or if they were Polish, like you brought me back to that period of time. Mm-hmm. But the question they all asked me is like, if you took what you know about then, but you used it as a prophetic opportunity to talk about what's going on now, I pivoted and said, I don't think it's Russia. I said, I think it's China. Because I think it's the naivete of people not knowing in enough time till there's a crisis that something's wrong, in the same way that we reached out to China, tried to embrace them through free trade, free market, thinking that would be enough to convert them to freedoms in the faith sense or whatever. That's the same way it was the détente of the Soviet Union that wound up needing Ronald Reagan and John Paul in their dramatic approach that I think is still missing today. You could argue the modern president is doing it his own kind of way, but I think that would be the missing piece. Is when I was doing the film more like a year and a half ago, it was before the tariffs and everything. It was more, it was the lull of we're all live together in one world and missing the aggression on the other side.
And Lucy, I just want to, go ahead. Sure. Go ahead, Paul.
And one reason why you cannot transpose the Ronald Reagan, John Paul II story onto today, I mean, this was so incredibly unique. I mean, think about this, Father Mitch. Not only did you have, obviously, the Cold War going on, the battle between the West and the East, and atheism versus democracy, but of all things, to have these two men who were not just grew up in the same time period and were actors and all these other remarkable similarities, but they were both shot. They were shot just 6 weeks apart. In March 30th, 1981, Ronald Reagan, May 13th, 1981, John Paul II. I mean, those of us who lived through it, that was an incredible moment. Pope and the president both shot. They both probably should have bled to death. He moved the bullet over a few centimeters, and they both bleed to death on the way to their respective hospitals. So they come together for the first time at the Vatican in June 1982, and they say to one another that they believe that God spared their lives for a special purpose, which is to take down and defeat atheistic Soviet communism. And by the end of the decade, of all things, in 1989, the Berlin Wall fell. So that's a story that's unrepeatable. It would be hard for, I don't care what President Trump and Pope Francis, for example, might be thinking, or whether they would get along or wouldn't get along. You can't take out of the story, you can't, two guys who are shot 6 weeks apart. The confluence of events in this story really is, as the book, the documentary says, it's dramatic. This really is a dramatic end to the Cold War in so many ways.
Well, let me just add one thing. So I'm thinking of like Thessalonians when it says first they say peace, peace, and then war comes. There's almost the human nature element of when there is peace, there's the forgetting to be very active in probing the potential enemy as much because you just let things settle to where they are. He's right about the conflagration of all the events, but I think where I was saying there's a blind spot, it would be the way where we've allowed the China potential opponent to escalate to the same degree.
And one last thing I would say, Lucy, tomorrow's the feast of Pope St. John Paul. I would urge you to remember the way he quoted the angels of God, who came to earth during many difficult and crisis situations. And the angels said the words constantly, "Be not afraid." And John Paul said again and again, "Be not afraid." Not because we're Pollyannish or because we are so important and great ourselves, but be not afraid because God is going to be the Lord of history, no matter what. And the evil spirit wants us to be afraid, and we have to have courage over against that. We have another caller. Hello, Robert.
Yes, hi, Father Mitch Pacwa. And this is Robert Abel from Troy, Michigan, Chaldean.
Oh,
yes.
Good to have you.
To you too. I told them that you're going to be, you like listening to Chaldean people.
Yes.
Well, my question is, many people may not know this. In 1884, Pope Pius XIII received a vision between during the Mass between heard the voice of Lucifer and God, and demanded that he would destroy his church. And God said to him, "You will not destroy my church." He said, "Give me 100 years." Well, it completed up to 100, and he permitted that he will not be able to destroy his church. Well, it happened in 1881 on May 13, which is the apparition of Mary. He was shot 3 times, St. John Paul the Great. And that was 3 years before 1884 to be completed, because it happened in 1884 and it was in 1984 where it completed 100 years, but 3 years before that. My question is that wouldn't that be significant to the 100 years complete before that happened, where he was able to assassinate John Paul II? And because according to the Pope, he said when he lived through it, he says one hand was trying to kill me, another hand was saving me. You know, his mother, Blessed Virgin, saved him.
Okay. And by the way, it was Pope Leo the 13th. We haven't had a Pius the 13th yet. We've ended up with Pius the 12th, but it was Pope Leo the 13th. Any of you want to comment on that perspective?
Paul, do you?
Paul?
Well, and it was 1 year after that, 1985, that Mikhail Gorbachev came into power. Yeah. So again, the timeline on all of this is quite remarkable.
And I think it's important also to realize while there is this providence going on, that does not mean that all the problems have gone away. We have lots of problems. We have dangerous situations. We've been dealing with a war on terrorism, or from terrorists around the world who have actually killed mostly Muslims, but they've been attacking in the West and elsewhere too. We've been dealing with temptations in this country to socialism and communism, ironically, often pushed by super rich billionaires and multi-billionaires who want us to become more socialist, probably because they want to be in charge of the economy. So we have that going. We have other problems. Do we need to do more in terms of prayer? Yes. And we have to confront these problems, but go ahead.
Just to make the point one more time and tie together a series of themes here, if we talk about China again as an example, think about how a state-driven country deals with their Muslim population when they find it to be a problem compared to the free.
Yeah.
Do you see the difference right there?
Yeah,
so democracy has so much more.
So folks don't understand. Yeah. The Chinese have been putting at least 1 million Muslims in their western provinces in concentration camps, and sometimes forcefully committing genocide and castrating and sexually neuding them. It's horrible.
Well, the reason I brought that up is the challenge of democracy to be so much more vigilant was my point before, because we let our guard down because we're not doing that. We're a free nation, but we leave the doors open, right? The roads you build to reach out to your friends are the very roads that you wind up welcoming your opponents. So yeah.
So
and remember too that Cardinal Carlo Cafara said that Sister Lucia, before she died, told him that the Blessed Mother told her that the last battle would be over the family and marriage. And so that goes beyond the Cold War.
Absolutely. Right. Well, look, we've run out of time. Again, I want to urge people to watch The Divine Plan, Ronald Reagan, John Paul II, and the dramatic end of the Cold War tonight, October 21st at 10 p.m. Eastern. The encore is on Thursday, the Feast of John Paul II, October 22nd at 4 p.m. And you can get a DVD to watch anytime from EWTNRC.com, item 1866. Thank you both for being with us, and may Almighty God bless all of you, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. And thank you for your support throughout this time of the COVID crisis. Keep us between your gas bill, electric bill, and cable bill. We'll keep bringing more programs to you, too. God bless you. Thank you.